Way back in July of last year, I made a video highlighting the Chill of Sontar. It's about time I talk about the classic, just regular old War Hydra itself. Now, today we've got a replay from Stormrunner. This is from the Clan War. I believe this is on Rubber Duck of War's channel on his stream already, but it was an awesome replay. Definitely wanted to show it to you guys. For those of you guys who don't know about Rubber Duck of War's channel, definitely check him out. If you like my channel, you'll definitely like his. But quickly, before they clash here, let's go over the builds. We've got Loke here leading his Corsairs. 4 melee Corsairs, 2 handbows. We've got the Regiment of Renowned Witch Elves here. Hydra with 2 chevrons. Sorceress of Death, some Dark Riders, and Bold One Knights. In the front line, Bestigor Herd with their high charge, high weapon damage. Should do some good stuff there against those low HP Elves. Giant Ungor Raiders and Regiment of Renowned Centaurs here, the Sons of Goros. Khazrak One Eye with his new damage resistance on his chariot. Going to charge straight into the front line here, go after Loke here, and with a massive 113 charge bonus, that will probably deal some significant damage. But of course, the Hydras here. Hydras have regeneration, standard regeneration, which makes them pretty solid against the Beastmen. The Beastmen, that is, don't have any fire damage, so there's not any risk of that interaction there. Only 60 armor on the Hydra is not amazing, but it does have solid missile resistance of 35%. Still, though, because it's relatively slow at 46 speed, it is pretty vulnerable. Only 28 melee defense means it will take quite a bit of incidental damage from low to mid-tier targets. But in the meantime, coming back to the overall battle here, you can see the Black Ark Corsairs definitely took a pounding there. But now the Hydra can move in against these Bestigor, and kind of the second wave here, these Witch Elves move in. They debuff the melee defense of the Bestigor Herd down to 22, and also enrage them. And the Hydra comes in to fight the Giant. Giant with 600 weapon strength should punch pretty hard here. The Hydra only 440, but obviously there's the difference of regeneration. Giant does have quite a bit more HP as well, but with the Witch Elves there to potentially support, that could turn around. Bold One Knights also charging in here, doing a pretty decent job, although they are being a little bit friendly fired by those Corsair handbows. But Sons of Goros with 70 armor don't require too much AP, but it definitely does help in this situation now, turning their attention to these Centaurs. That's a great play there. Cold One Knights also charging in with that extra charge bonus up to 55 into those Bestigor Herd, doing some pretty nice armor-piercing damage. Giant will hold out for some time in the center, but over here on this side, Beastmen doing much better. Got some Ungor Herd supporting Bestigor Herd, managed to trap those. Corsair handbows should be taking them out relatively well, but the Hydra will be holding in the center, tanking out, and with support, trading very well against this Giant. Of course, it's also got the breath attacks as well. Haven't seen any yet, but we'll keep an eye on that going forward. Of course, Earth's Lore of Death here with leadership debuffs and Spirit Leech, as well as the terror aspect of Dread Knight. And yeah, the Centaurs pulling up and around. Beastmen heroes kind of break this pocket right here. Khazrak comes in. His chariot's a pretty strong option, honestly, in certain situations with that damage resistance, especially if the Dark Elves can catch him out in the open with range tools. Right now, I'm just focusing on those Ungor Raiders, as they are a threat to the Hydra, which is definitely a smart play. But, of course, that does leave them vulnerable to the Bray Shaman. Khazrak here also getting a brutal charge there. Giant's gone. Loke here is relatively healthy. The Hydra is still fighting. Witch Elves are now charging in here. Should be able to terrify these Hounds. Hounds do count as infantry, of course, as you should know. So the anti-infantry bonus of the Witch Elves does come into play, but Bestigor also following up along with some Destroyers of Drakqual. The Regiment of Renowned Spears with poison quickly get terrified, but they might have a little bit of poison effect there. It looks like they did on that Hydra. Should be able to hold out. Those Bestigor Herd might finish off the Sisters of Singing Doom, but they're somewhat vulnerable to terror as well. The Hydra should be able to carry them in that long engagement, but the Beastmen are regrouping. You can see Khazrak cleaning up these handbows and some of these other units being cleaned up here. Cold One Knights falling to the Bestigor. Beastmen are regrouping quite a few of their forces, and even the Giant with only 200 HP is coming back. It's going to come down to the Hydra and Loke here along with the Sorceress Lord Death. As, yeah, a lot of the stuff for Dark Elves is gone. Basically everything that's not a single entity at this point, right? So, single entities, though, are quite good. Loke here and the Hydra both able to regenerate and tank out for quite some time. And Beastmen, a lot of people would say they struggle against armored single entities. I would say they just struggle against tanky single entities in general. The Hydra, although it isn't super heavily armored, like a giant line of Ungor Raiders would be pretty dangerous to it. Even this one relatively healthy Ungor Raider here is able to do some okay work, but given the Beastmen don't have the greatest missile tools in the world, and weirdly enough, for being a kind of beast monster faction, they actually don't have great monster selection for fighting. But oh man, the giant, it's roasted by the breath attack there. Instead of using it on the Ungor Raiders, just spitefully, you know, breathing the giant, make sure he can't come back. Works out okay. But the Sorceress gets bumped from behind by Khazrak. That sounded a little bit better in my head. But anyway, Hydra is still, though, providing this terror against the Beastmen. Super critical here. And just able to tank out quite a bit of damage. If we look at the healing cap space used of the Hydra, you can see already 2,300 HP, give or take, has been used there of that healing cap, and quite a bit is still available. So that's pretty impressive. Ungor Raiders are becoming somewhat of an issue though, but of course the many heads healing proc, which unlike some other healing procs, it doesn't have the same kind of downside. But yeah, it has a chance of going off. Hit points go below 50% base. We'll get a nice little healing proc there, and can much accelerate the process of getting it to its healing cap. At this point, though, the Ungor Raiders are a serious issue, and despite this, the Hydra managed to deal some pretty good damage to Khazrak, along with Lokir and the Sorceress. Terrified him away. Will that be enough at the end of the day? It remains to be seen. But potentially the Sorceress could come in here and try and heal off the Sons of Goros and bail the Hydra out. Or just go after Khazrak, which may be a better idea. If you can just either break or kill Khazrak, ideally. Nice Spirit Leech there. Although, yeah, he is counting as in melee right now. So actually what you'd want to do, just technically from the very, very minor thing, but peel the Sorceress, just keep her chasing and nearby, and then Spirit Leech Khazrak while you're not in melee combat. You know, with him in quotations, melee combat. But at this point, the Hydra's been left out to dry. Still, though, did generate some great value. Not only in doing damage, which paid for itself largely, and also tanking damage as well. This is one of the matchups, I think, where the Hydra is still pretty good because of some of the changes to mass bracing and, you know, a lot of factions kind of embracing this wider style with a lot of cheap, cost-effective units, especially people realizing how good, like, cheap missile units are. It's a little bit harder to make the Hydra work in a lot of matchups and situations, simply because your opponent is likely to have the tools to deal with them. You can see, though, as soon as Khazrak fled off the side of the map there, put a pretty significant dent in the balance of power. All of the Beastmen units are going to be suffering leadership penalties, and as a result, will be much more likely to rout. But a nice Pit of Shades here, just directly on top of Lokir. That should keep him maybe locked in place. He will get staggered pretty consistently by that. No, actually, he manages to escape the Vortex, and that triggers army losses. Actually, probably the sources over here, but let's pretend. Anyway, big thanks to Stormrunner for sending that one in. Definitely a fun one. Yeah. Lokir tanking some damage and dealing damage, but the Hydra dealing even more. 1630 damage value, almost 10,000 damage dealt overall. Pretty good stuff. The Dark Riders did okay. Same thing, Coldman Knights largely did okay. Corsair Handbows can be very good here. They're a little risky. You can see one of them didn't pay for themselves. The other one definitely did, though. Almost doubled up, actually, in terms of value. Great job by the Sisters of Singing Doom as well. Some extra terror never hurts, and the high DPS does help against the Beastmen. Debuffing their melee defense is also, might not seem like the best, just because their melee defense is generally pretty poor to begin with, but it helps to have that little bit extra, certainly. Especially because the Hydra's, I mean, its attack's better than it was before. That's another change, too, that the Hydra underwent. From when I made my Chill of Sontar video way back in the day, Hydras and many other units had their stats reworked, kind of mid to high tier monster units specifically, and that includes dragons as well as Hydras, Tomb King's constructs, quite a few of them as well. But just quickly to touch on the Hydras, once again, kind of review, yeah, 1650 for the base with 2 chevrons. It goes up to 1767, which I guess didn't quite pay for itself then in terms of damage, but pretty close, plus the tanking obviously is a big part of that. Chill of Sontar, you pay, what, 350 extra points. You get Frostbite, which is awesome. Also a breath that triggers Frostbite, I believe. Maybe, maybe not. But you also get, yeah, just a little better stats, obviously better leadership. Only +8 melee defense, which is not that much. Only 34 melee defense for a 2,000 point monster is a little bit tough. So that is one downside of using the Hydra. But against certain factions, I would say, Warriors of Chaos potentially are one, although they can bring Lore of Fire. They're not going to have that great of missile tools, and you can generally contest them pretty well in terms of Marauder Horsemen and so on. They're Beastmen as well. Again, not the greatest missile tools in the world. You can kind of counter their mobile pressure in many situations, and the Hydra just offers you a nice anchor in that situation. A lot of the matchups with like cheap long-range archers, for example, for Bretonia, or like the High Elves, Dwarfs obviously have a massive range focus. It's going to be a little bit harder to make them work. Empire, if you think your opponent's going to go with a very melee-centric build, maybe it can work here as well. Empire also probably the best fire faction in the game in terms of bringing fire damage, and although the Hydra is the only unit on the Dark Elves roster directly weak to fire damage, it is pretty common to see Lore of Fire in this matchup simply because Knights of the Blazing Sun and anything else that can get fire damage from the Warrior Priest Banner of Eternal Flame, benefiting from Kindle Flame is just very good to deal that extra shock damage to something that's relatively squishy, like most Dark Elf units are, so you're likely to run into fire-causing units in this matchup, so it can be tough to make it work there. Greenskins is an interesting one. There's potential here, but the Greenskins, I think they can probably beat the Hydra up in melee with their infantry, not to mention they're likely to go with 6 skirmish cavalry in many cases, which can be potentially tough to protect, especially since they cause poison, meaning that your Hydra is going to be even slower than usual, and that's a similar story against the Lizardmen. Those poison missiles, it's hard to operate the Hydra efficiently with so much poison flying around. High Elves, again, cheap long-range archers, decent range tools, generally bring a lot of spearmen as well. Norska, the javelins are an issue for sure. Skaven, again, some people would say high-level missile faction. I actually have a discussion coming about Skaven, how I think they're potentially outside the top 5 in shooting factions, which is a very controversial take, I'll admit, but I'll kind of go through my reasoning in some upcoming videos, so stay tuned for that. Tomb Kings, yeah, I mean, again, have plenty of decent missile tools. Same thing with Vampire Coast. Vampire counts as an interesting one, potentially. I mean, maybe there's an argument here, but also the Hydra's leadership, not amazing. It's okay, but in general, I find that just going with the high stat Elves is better in this matchup. The low melee defense means this thing will take a lot of damage from something like Blood Knights. Maybe it'll work out in this matchup, though. Yeah, Warriors of Chaos we talked about already. Wood Elves is a no. Again, super shooty. This is the issue, though, right now. Previously, you could make the Hydra work, and potentially even in some matchups, if your opponent doesn't bring enough range tools, and you kind of complement your build around it, like their Stormrunner did have quite a few cav units, I would maybe even go wider, go with like 4 Cold One Riders, or sorry, 4 Dark Riders, 2 Cold One Riders. Lokir is not a bad option, but actually I might even take the High Beastmaster here on his chariot. That way I can lock units in place with the Tormentor's Sword. The Hydra then being so slow, I can potentially catch more stuff with it. Not to mention this Whiplash is pretty nice for giving the Hydra some extra weapon strength and charge. So I'd probably roll with that. The extra melee defense of Stand Your Ground is also very helpful to have around the War Hydra. I don't remember, Lokir, I believe, yeah, he does not have Stand Your Ground, so Beastmaster is a little bit better in terms of support, although certainly as kind of a tank foot character, I would say Lokir is undoubtedly better. If you kind of wanted to go with both, I guess you could go with the classic Morathi Hydra foot blob, which is a pretty classic, you know, kind of old school situation. Maybe even take, you know, some more foot heroes and so on to kind of complement that. But anyway, just kind of spitballing here a little bit in terms of builds. This could potentially still work if you have the tools to shut down your opponent's range. Like you could really do something very interesting here potentially and go with like I don't know, this, I don't have all my hero slots filled, which is not ideal, so we might come in here and just grab a Canine Assassin. I don't really know what faction this would be up against. Maybe, I don't know, Elves or Empire. You just try and kind of countershoot their artillery, like sweep their infantry ranged units, and then destroy their melee infantry and cav with your Hydra. I don't know. It's, again, very theoretical. I would need to refine this a little bit to figure it out, but maybe there's a place for this still in some other matchups. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Is the Hydra now forgotten in most matchups, or is it still a useful tool in a multitude of situations? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.